Our next step now is to actually create a logger implementation. So we're going to have one concrete implementation. And as I mentioned previously, because we have an interface, we can have as many implementations as we like. We can have a database logger, we can have a file logger, we can have a JSON logger, depending on what kind of logger that you choose to use. So we're going to create a PHP class here, and then we're just going to call this logger. And the namespace is app logger, and it's inside of the folder logger. And we're going to say we want this to implement the logger interface. And once you do that, if you look at my test editor here, it's already saying that something is not right because I'm implementing this interface, and the contract defined inside of this interface says that I must implement 9 methods. So with my test editor, I could actually do this easily. So I could just click here and say add method stubs, and it's going to add all of the methods that I actually need to implement for me. So if we scroll down, you can see that we have all of those methods here. And now we can have a concrete implementation for each of the methods that we have here, which is essentially what we want to do in this lecture. And as I mentioned previously, we're just going to create a very basic logger that suits our application, but with the possibility of extending it to support other more advanced or even more robust logging for applications. So we want to add one method here. So we're just going to have a private method. So let's call this private function add record. So this essentially is going to take 3 arguments. So it's going to take the same argument like we have here. Take a string, take a message, and then take context. And just so we talk about context a little bit, context are basically additional information that we want to pass to the logger. So these are information that can provide more insight as to what really happened. And you can see here that it's optional because we may not have additional information, and in some cases we may have. So when we have, we want to actually log it. So the first thing we want to do here is to create a new instance of app. So we're going to say application is going to be equal to new app. And remember that our app class is basically a class that gives us access to some basic things that we need to use in our application. So the 2 things that we'll be needing from 2 or 3 things we'll be needing from the app class. We'll need the environment. We also need the path to our logger. We also need to know that path, and then we also want to get the server time. All right. So the first thing we want to get here will be the date. So this is basically the date of the event, and we can actually get that from our application server time. So we can say app get the server time, which is a datetime interface, and then we can use a specific format. So this is simple, basically what we did previously. Next, we want to create a variable here called log path. That is going to be equal to application. Then we want to get the log path. So say get log path. And then next we want another variable to give us the environment. So that will be env. And the reason why we need the environment is when we actually create the log file, we want to append the environment to the name of the file, so that if we are on development environment, we will know that this is the log file for development environment. So that way it's just easy to distinguish. So we say get environment, and then next we want to actually prepare the details that we want to log. So we're going to say details that will be equal to, we can actually just pass this to printf to make things a bit cleaner. And then we can pass it a format of the log that we want to use. So let's say here we want to pass it a string, and then we want a %s, we want a space, and then put a dash, and then say level. So this is going to be the log level, a column, and then we're going to put another dash, And then we're going to say the message. So that's going to be the actual message. And then %s to represent the actual message. So remember, %s are just placeholders. So we're going to replace them with actual values from variables that we're passing into the printf function. And then we're going to have a dash again and then say context. And that's also going to be %s. And then right here, we're just going to pass in all of the variables. So the first one is going to be level. Okay, so right here, you can see that we have the first %s here. So that should be the date, not level. So that should be date, and then level, and then we have message, and then we have context. So for context, because this is going to be an array, we can convert it to string using JSON encode. So we could say JSON encode, and then pass it context. And then finally, what we want to do here is to use the PHP constant to denote the end of the line. Then we can end this. So we have basically everything that we need to pass into the logger file. Okay, we need to prepare the full part and then just send the information to a file that we're going to create. Okay, so this is our logger part. So the file name is going to be equal to, and then we can also use printf again, and then just put in a couple of placeholders. So we want %s. I'll explain why we need all of this. So %s, and then we need a slash. Okay, so the first %s is going to be the directory where we want to log to. So the log part, which is going to be our logger folder that we have here. Okay, and then we have a slash, which means now we're inside of that directory. We want to create a new file. So the new file that we want to create, we're going to use a kind of name. So we say %s dash %s dot log. So basically what we're doing here is we're going to use the environment and a date to actually name the file. So the file is going to be dev or local dash date. Okay, so that's the date that this actually happens. And then we're going to just keep putting information, appending information to that specific file. Okay, so that for one day, if we actually have multiple things happening in our application, we don't want to create different files. So if we have this specific file name that deals with the date and the environment, then we can just append to the content of that file. So basically now we need to pass in the variable. The first one is going to be the log part, which is a folder. And then the second one is going to be the environment. So that will be env. And then the third one is going to actually be date. So let's just use the PHP date function. So we're going to say date. And then now we want to pass it a format. So that will be, let's say, j.n.y. So this is going to basically be day, month, and year. Okay. And they're going to be integers. So it's just going to be the day dot month dot year. All right. And then the file is going to have extension .log. So that's basically all. And then finally, we can say file, use the PHP function file underscore put underscore contents. And then we can pass it the file name. So this is the file name. And then we can pass it the details. And then we can say file append or it. Okay, so what this means is that because this file is going to contain multiple records from different events, so just append to it. So add a new line whenever we call this method to that file. So it's simple as that. And then finally, and this is the most easiest part, we're just going to implement this private method for the other 8 methods or 8 or 9 methods that we have here. So right here, I'm going to just say this add record. Okay, so that's going to be add record, and we're going to specify the level. Okay, and then this is going to be equal to the variable that we have here, and then the message, and then context. So as simple as that is, we are now implementing a logger that writes to a file. So for this, we're going to use a constant, so log level. So we have a log level constant, and then this is going to be the bug. All right, so let's copy that and then put it here. Then this is going to be info. So log level info. And then we can scroll up and do the same for the rest. Then here is notice. And then here is warning. Let's scroll up a bit. Then here is error. This is critical. And I think we're left with 2. Okay, so this is alert. And this is emergency. Right, so this is just a simple implementation. So we can actually do more things here. For example, if the user pass in a level for log that does not exist, we should actually throw an exception. Okay, so because basically this is what the PSRO specification says. If the level does not exist, we should actually throw an exception. So let's just quickly do that. And before we actually call the logger class, we can use reflection to check if the level is actually valid. So we're going to say object is equal to new reflection class. So this is a PHP class that is really useful when you work with OOP. So this is going to be log level. Then basically it accepts a class name and then gives you access to lots of information that are inside of this class. So in this case, the information that we are mostly concerned with will be the constants that are defined inside of this log level class. So if you come back to log level, you can see all of the constants that we defined there. So we want to see if the level that the user entered here actually exists inside of this class as a constant. If it does, then everything is good. But if it doesn't, then we are going to throw an invalid argument exception. So we're going to say if not in array level, so which is the level that the user entered, and then we're going to say object get constants. So this is going to basically return an array. So if we look at the definition of this method, basically returns an array of constants. So these are user defined constants. So you can actually read more in the link that is provided there. So let's come back here, and then here we are going to throw an exception. So let's just add one more exception class, and then let's say invalid log level argument. So invalid log level argument. So that's going to be in our exception class. And then we can then extend base exception. Then basically come back again to our log class and say throw new invalid log level argument. And then we can pass it the level that the user actually provided. And then also we can pass it the constants that contain the array of constants that we are getting back from reflection class. So pass in the level, and then we can pass in this constant. So let's say levels equal to this, and then here we can actually now use levels, and then we can pass it here levels. I don't know if this is a good name for the variable, so maybe we could say valid levels, valid log level array. Okay, so this would be like a better name to use. This is valid log level arrays, and then here pass it this, and then pass it this. All right, so we are now sure that we're actually throwing an exception if you pass in a log level that is not valid. So it's now time for us to actually test out this and then see if things work the way that we expected. So I'm going to take this and then bring it up here to say use reflection class, and then I'm going to just remove the slash. So let's come here and then remove this. So basically something else that we could have done is to actually cache the exception that will be thrown by this class. The reflection class throws an exception. We can cache that, or we can decide to just leave it and let our exception handler cache that